Hi everybody, we're recapping the MSA presidential debates. Two of them happened in the past week. I'm Perreault from MUTV. I'm the executive producer of 23 News.
And I'm Caitlyn Rosen from the Maneater. I'm the assistant student politics editor.
So I think one of the really interesting things about this time around, this second round of the MSA debate or presidential election, is that neither of the two presidential candidates has a ton of experience with MSA Senate.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really interesting, especially because in the past, that really hasn't happened. Almost every candidate has served in Senate in some capacity. And even the vice president in the WPATA slate doesn't really have a whole lot of experience.
He has some, but not a ton.
Yeah.
So I think that was interesting in the debate last night when they or Maneater debate on Thursday night, when Julia WPATA especially tried to play up, trying to talk to different members of the MSA Senate, the executive cabinet, Nathan Willett, trying to get a sense of Senate.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
With Robert Schmidt, he talked about how that he got into the race late. He decided very late, only after the first round kind of ended. The first round ended with, for those of you guys who do not know, the first round of the presidential campaign ended after multiple candidates had to withdraw their candidacy after there were tweets that have racist, homophobic thoughts in them. So MSA pretty much scrapped the election, then moved it to after spring break. That was before spring break, in the middle of March, around there. So one of the things with Schmidt is that Schmidt said that he didn't start till after, so he hasn't been able to have as much of a conversation with people, leaders, trying to get a sense of the responsibilities of the role.
Yeah, I found that quite surprising. I feel like he could have talked to people in MSA, so I was a little surprised that he wasn't at the Senate meeting on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, because I know Julia said that she did sit in on a Senate meeting. It was interesting with the question of full Senate. Julia said that she knew full Senate and listed off some of the organizations that are part of full Senate, and Robert had no idea really what full Senate was.
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised about that, especially because she's been having those conversations and he really hasn't, from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, sticking with Julia and the conversations, one of the things that she's been talking about is her platform, and how the only things that she included on her platform was ones that she was able to have like definitive conversations with the people and groups on campus about.
Yeah, I think Schmidt's big thing is with the budget, and I feel like it's because that's all that he really has any experience or knowledge about.
I mean, Schmidt he definitely does, you see that he does definitely love Mizzou. He definitely does have pride for Mizzou. Yeah. That is definitely evident. But for me, the thing that stuck out with me for him was input. One word he kept hitting on that time and time again throughout both debates.
Yeah, it was input from students, and especially in terms of finances and the budget. I think that's the overarching thing of his campaign.
And to me, it seems like he kind of wants to put up a poll for every decision that he makes.
Yeah.
Do you like it or do you not like it?
I don't really have an opinion on it. My main concern would be how many students are actually going to participate in that, and that was one of the questions that I tweeted at their slate during the first debate. I said, how will you ensure that students are actually checking their email? So I think that would be a big concern for their campaign.
No, I agree. One of the things that's interesting is that Schmidt and Kvetchy don't really have as much of a social media presence as Julia and Thomas do.
Yeah, I found it difficult to find their slate, but
I believe it started off with just one of their paw prints, and but now it's their actual. I believe they do have a full website now. So that is good for them. Another thing that I found kind of interesting was there were a couple of times when Julia and Robert took opposite sides on issues. One of them was parking on campus. Julia argued that it should be more for seniors or students who live off campus, and Robert argued that it should be more for students who live on campus. I thought that was kind of an interesting contradiction there.
Yeah, I would agree, because I was surprised that she vocalized for off campus, because I thought her platform said otherwise, but I think I was wrong on that. I probably misread.
I mean, I see the arguments on both sides there, but I mean, it probably has, because I know Robert, speaking on his experience with the budget, saying that they pay more into Mizzou, so they should be able to park there.
Definitely, and I think it's one of those debates that really can't be answered, because the student body is made up of both people that live on campus and off, so I think it's a compromise type of situation for sure.
Another interesting thing about this runaround with the MSA presidential campaign is that the finances are a little bit different. Usually you have a little bit longer of a period. This one's kind of cramped because of the first election. So Schmidt and Kvetchy obviously have raised very little no money at all, just money from out of Robert's own pocket. But Wapata and Maneater have almost $1,700.
Yeah, another interesting thing to point out with this time around is that there's actually a cap on how much money they can raise and spend, whereas in previous elections that hasn't existed. Like in the last election, the first go-around of this election rather, one of the slates raised $10,000 from 2 donations. So then MSA made the decision that they needed to lower the campaign spending limit. I thought that was very interesting.
That's just for this go-round, is that?
Yeah, but that's like an official policy now for all presidential debate or elections.
I know last year there was talk about that because it did get rather pricey in terms of
yes, for sure.
the cost of it. One of the interesting things was that they, another Robert going back to his input point, when they got to criticize the current executive leadership of MSA for a minute, when the question was asked to them, Julia criticized them for being not being transparent enough, and Robert said they should have more student input.
I thought that was an interesting question because I didn't see that from the previous debate, which was far more focused on social justice and all of that.
One of Julia's big things is mental health and facilitating mental health and working with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting when she was kind of pressed on that a little bit. Exactly, what are you going to do?
Yeah, especially because they were asking like specifically what conversations that she's had, and I thought that was quite interesting as well.
Especially because looking at her platform here, a lot of it does center around mental health.
Yeah, it's very focused on mental health and communication with organizations on campus as well.
Yeah, and I believe it was also interesting how neither of them had anything about sexual assault in either of the platforms,
Mm-hmm.
and then Julia kind of backtracked and said that she had conversations since they published the platform.
Right, and I thought it was interesting how they both said it was an oversight on their part.
Yeah.
They both kind of agreed that that was something that should have been included in their platforms.
Looking at Robert's platform for a second, he talks a lot about political involvement and bringing current senators and representatives from Congress to school. So I mean, I thought that was kind of an interesting point.
Yeah, I would.
You have Josh Hawley, who is currently running, who
Mm-hmm.
used to teach here. His wife, I believe, still does.
I thought it was interesting in his platform how he mentions bringing Claire McCaskill to Mizzou, although she was here this year, brought by Mizzou Democrats. So I think it's interesting how he mentioned that.
I mean, I think he was referring to the fact that maybe getting her as it becomes closer to the election.
Midterms, yeah,
midterm
definitely.
election coming up in November. One thing that was interesting was when the question of fraternities and sororities came up, because obviously there has been some trouble recently with IFC and PHA, IFC especially with a couple chapters getting kicked off for hazing. And obviously both Julia and Thomas are members of fraternities and sororities. So I thought that was her answer was particularly interesting.
Yeah, because I think Schmidt because he isn't involved in Greek life, so he answered saying that he would work with like the organization of Greek life, but I didn't think he understood that the question was saying how would you work with IFC.
Yeah.
So I don't think he understood that like the organization is IFC. So I think that's definitely something that platform is kind of lacking in, I guess.
Yeah. One of the things with Schmidt, I got the sense that he didn't really understand the time commitments of MSA, being MSA president. Because, I mean, I believe he said that he would still work like 2 jobs.
Yeah, and he was in 20 hours this semester.
This hours. I mean, from the way that I've heard Nathan Willett describe the job, it is a very time-consuming job.
Yeah, it's even just being in Senate is quite time-consuming. So I was a bit surprised that he mentioned that.
I mean, he does seem like a very motivated individual, but just seems like a lot.
Yes. Because he continued to reiterate, like, he's a very hard worker. He would work very hard if elected. So I don't doubt that, but I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because I know Julia said that she had met with Nathan and had Nathan pretty much take her through what a week is like for him so she can get a good sense of the time commitment.
Right.
I don't believe Robert had done that
Yeah,
yet.
I think it was because he wasn't in the campaign whenever she met with him. I think that was in the previous.
That may have been, yeah. Because I know they had 3 slates then.
Yes.
Another interesting thing with Julia is going back to her mental health when she talks about interconnecting the facilities to make it one.
I think that's interesting because it is kind kind of challenging to connect organizations on campus because some of them may not want to talk to other organizations. So I really thought it was interesting when someone brought up the question, like, how would you continue to connect organizations even if they don't want to like talk to you when you reach out to them?
Yeah.
I thought she had a very interesting response to that question as well.
Because I mean, it will inevitably be a problem that she will face.
Definitely, definitely.
Because she talked about active minds. She talked a lot about she really praised the work that the mental health organizations do on campus.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I found most interesting was probably the very last question debate, was when they each got to ask another one a question.
Yeah, that was my favorite part as well.
Yeah, because obviously Julia asked Robert if he understands what being the president is and the commitment that it takes.
Yeah, and I think that definitely goes back to his mention of his current responsibilities.
And then Robert asked Julia how she'll reach out to students who don't have the time to be involved in campus organizations.
Which again, I think was an interesting question, considering her involvement with Greek life and all of that. He was probably asking for students who aren't involved in those type of things.
I think it goes back to Robert's input thing, and really, I think it seems to me that he really wants to vocalize more so what MSA does and get more people involved.
Yeah, I think especially for students who aren't involved in like anything on campus, because those students like seldom hear about what's happening in MSA. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Definitely an interesting move right there. One interesting thing, I don't know that this was brought up in the debate, but one part of Robert's platform is promotion of sustainability at Mizzou, trying to eliminate some of the waste that they have. I thought that was rather interesting.
Yeah, that wasn't brought up in either of the debates, but when I spoke with him like a week ago or so, he mentioned that he would want to work with dining halls to create some sort of compost system, so I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he does have a lot of good ideas.
Definitely.
But I feel like a lot of them are just not necessarily flushed out all the way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that goes, and I think the WAPATA slate has similar issues where it's lack of involvement in MSA that goes back to there's no like legitimate way that they would be able to accomplish some of these goals, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that once they kind of get into, if whichever slate is elected, once they get into office, they'll be able to kind of narrow down and
and they'll be able to see
what they'll be able to accomplish.
Like realistically what is achievable. I definitely agree with that.
So what do you think was the most important moment from the debates?
I think definitely when both of them were asked what's one thing, if they could only accomplish one thing in their platforms, what would it be? And I think that really went back on like their central goal of running. So for Schmidt, it was like increasing student input on the budget especially. And then for WAPATA, it was, back to mental health and communication with organizations. And I think that was really telling of the goals for both slates.
For me, I thought when they got to ask each other a question was particularly interesting because then you kind of saw through the lens of how they viewed the other candidate.
Definitely, for sure.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you for watching, everybody. I'm Daniel Perreault from MUTV.
And I'm Caitlyn Rosen from the Maneater.